Hey, Shalom, Sister Kate here. Uh, I'll wait a minute or two, start into my intro here. I know I gave nobody notice, so if you show up, that's awesome, and if you don't, that's okay too. Whiskey Oscar for Whiskey. I think that's the right letters numbers combo on Instagram just sent me a message saying that Louisville had 7 people shot in rioting. And the rioting, I mean, if you don't know that there has been rioting in Minneapolis, let me get this dirty towel out of there. That's not very attractive. LA, New York, over the death of a man whose name was George Floyd, who was strangled to death. Shalom. Chasing Life. I am fine, Sister Harriet. Shalom. Michelle Craig, trying to stay positive this morning. Mr. LA Hunter 29. Hello. Shalom. Shalom. Mr. George Floyd was murdered, was strangulated, asphyxiated, denied oxygen for more than 6 minutes, which will kill a human being by a police officer in the Minneapolis, I guess, police force. And it has caused rioting across the country. Pastor and I have discussed it. Personally, I think that man was murdered, and I think those officers should be charged. I don't think all police are bad. I don't think all people protesting are bad. I think there is sort of a inevitable unrest in a community that feels that they have been unfairly targeted, that they have been unfairly treated. Now, I am going to continue on that thought. I wanted to break off and jump back to the title of this live stream, which I don't think I'm going to be on that long. I don't intend to, but I really wanted to get some of these thoughts out of my head before life takes over and we move on to whatever's coming next. Shavuot. Shavuot's in 2 Hebrew days, 3 Hebrew days. It's on Sunday, quote unquote Sunday, first day. We traveled recently, Pastor and I, to do some business into an area that was very heavily COVID, had a big old breakout. So we were trying to be super careful and stay away from, the public. And so we were kind of looking forward to just getting this stuff done and just a small break from, the everyday grind of being off grid. And I know I'm not reading your comments right now. I apologize. I want to get my thoughts going. So while we were in this particular location, and I posted this a little bit on the community page, we were traveling down a very straight country road, paved road, nice, even, speed limits like 50, 55, something like that. And all of a sudden, because I'm driving, over the crest of a hill, I see this big white pickup truck, and it's got those huge wide mirrors on it that tells me, the person who's driving it pulls something with it. And I don't remember if it was a dually or if it was a fifth wheel, because it wasn't towing anything, but it was big. It was a big truck, probably like a F-250 or F-350. And right behind it is a police officer with lights and sirens going. And in front of me are a couple of cars driving. And so I'm talking to Pastor and saying, hey, those guys in front of us, when are they going to notice there's a police officer there and that we need to get off the road? And so, we discussed that for just a second. And then we're watching. We're like, eventually those people kind of figured out they needed to get over, and we got over. And then here comes another police car. 2 of them right on the tail of this truck. And then in the rear view, I'm thinking, why is the truck not pulling over? Is that person deaf? Like they don't notice there's a police car right behind this truck? Woo, 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 it's broad daylight. It's not, not hard to see. It's not raining or anything. And then as they crest the hill, here comes another police car. And that one is screaming down this road. He's going like 80, 90. And then it occurs to me, those police cars are chasing that white pickup. And I thought, that's just weird. Like why if you were going to run from the cops, would you choose a large, easy to see pickup truck with, not easy maneuverability? And we continue driving, and here comes two more police officers. And some of them, I think, were city, but some were sheriff. And basically, that was all the cops in the area, in that county, just following that pickup truck. And so Pastor jokes, now it's not more than, 10 minutes down when I see on the lane coming the opposite direction, the biggest frog I've ever seen in my life. Like huge, dinner plate, like this big around. And it's just walking across this pavement. And it's walking, it's not hopping. It's like up off the ground. So maybe the pavement was hot. But someone commented on that picture in the community thing that frogs do that when they're in unknown territory too, when they don't want to like accidentally drag their belly on the ground or something. And then we get to our destination, and we're only there, 5-10 minutes, and I'm outside looking around and noticing wild edibles and stuff. And I hear this huge boom, huge, not a car backfiring, not someone shooting, not like somebody pounding on a board or something. Well, boom! And this is very odd for that part of the state we were in. Like, we're in a rural kind of residential area. And I thought, okay, so maybe the neighbor, they have a barn and cows and all sorts of stuff. I said, maybe their grain silo blew up or something. So as I'm walking in, Pastor comes out, and he's like, did you hear that boom? And I'm like, yeah. He said, what do you think that was? I said, I think it could have been, the neighbor across the street. Maybe their barn collapsed or something. So he went to find out, and we come to find out that there's a quarry nearby, and the quarry had just blown up part of the quarry. So somebody had used dynamite. But those three things in a period of like half an hour, to me, was very odd. Just strange things. So, and the day before that, our dog had killed a fawn. Pastor talked about that on one of his, I think on the Patreon channel. That's not that unusual for, dogs in the springtime, but for us, it was unusual because the poor little thing was wounded, and we tried to help take care of it, and it didn't work, and it passed away. And, so that was kind of emotionally tugging, because that's not who we are. I mean, we have those dogs, but we're very friendly to the wildlife here on Shofar Mountain. So that was kind of upsetting. So now we come to this morning. Oh, and both nights we were traveling, we were listening on the live stream traffic of the cops, like as they're talking to each other in St. Paul and Minneapolis and things, and what they're saying to each other, and what the crowds are doing. And now the O'Reilly's is on fire. Now the Target's been gutted, and this, that, and the other thing. So we've been like totally aware that this stuff is going on. And then I got this message on Instagram. And I'm just like shaking my head, because it's kind of strange. Now, America has riots sometimes, and usually there's a precipitating event. The Rodney King riots, I'm trying to remember, I can't even remember the name of the person now, who there was a trial, and the person who killed the other person was acquitted, and that made, the people riot in the streets for, a certain amount of time because of that. So rioting has its mitigating factors. Rioting has elements that start and affect when riots happen. So throw in on top of everything that's happened so far, it's 5 months into 2020, which is really odd for me to think about. It's almost halfway into this year. Like, it has flown by to me. Once COVID hit, now, everything, you got to get prepped. If you weren't prepped before, and you got to wear masks, and the food situation and everything, we've come to halfway through the year. The mitigating factors are there. They are the things that have been happening in the months before. The fact that there was those huge fires, that there was the locust plagues out in the Middle East. Then came COVID and everything COVID involved, including quarantining and wearing masks and people being very, very ill, and no social interaction really for people who are very human. That thing gets heavier every year. Thank you, Father. A little birdie reminded me. Target store was robbed in the same area. There is no way to make things right. Hey, Penelope, the squirrely prepper. Hey, Aloha prepper. Shelly, good morning. Okay, so, and D-Nick, shalom. Shalom to all y'all. And then if you guys were on the Wednesday Wisdom live stream, or if you watched it after it became a video, I talked about Catastrophe, this really good documentary and book that showed cause and effect between things happening. A volcanic eruption causes darkness in the world for 18 months, which causes drought, because rain doesn't fall correctly, causes starvation because crops can't grow and there's no sunlight, and so on. It's a cavalcade. It's a, this made this happen, this made this happen, this made this happen. Well, now we've got these disasters and this pandemic, and a pandemic is huge. That's why the World Health Organization didn't declare a pandemic until COVID had spread to several different countries. And it's in 180 countries. That is like basically the whole world. Pandemics have their after effects. Pandemics have social ramifications. Just some of the things that we all, like all of us, probably have either read stories or known someone or seen where your everyday life gets so out of whack. And that's one reason why I post sometimes on the community section those parody songs about this pandemic, where people are talking about every day is the same. It's Groundhog Day. We're just living the same day over and over because no one's going to work and no one's going to school, and they stay in their pajamas all day long. And you know, I've played my favorite video game, and you know, I'm lonely, and just all that kind of stuff. That affects people. And the FedGov has talked about, you know, there's going to be more suicides, there's going to be more abuse, there's going to be more addiction, because we're social animals. This live stream would be totally different if this is all you saw of me, because you can't read my facial expressions. You can kind of see if I move my eyes around, but you cannot see if I'm smiling at you or if I'm angry with you. It affects us on an emotional level, that we cannot hug each other, that we cannot kiss each other. And you know, there's those videos of people going to their grandma's nursing home and just waving at the grandma through a window or a glass or something, like she's a fish in an aquarium. Well, all of that ramps this stuff up. And with the justified and unjustified police shootings of people, the general public is, I'm a little concerned about it, and I've mentioned it in other videos too. Cortisol is on the rise, you know, your stress levels go up. Exactly. Pastor and I commented on the change in policing after, and I'm trying to remember if it was Reagan or Bush, declared the war on drugs. War on drugs. We are going to fight the drug epidemic in the United States, which, folks, it's still an epidemic. You know that, the whole opioid crisis. Not even going to get into that right now. But the nature of policing change. Miami Vice is a really good TV show to see how the policing changed and how policing became militarized, and why. Because as drugs got bigger and bigger and drug people made more and more money, they became more militarized. They armed themselves with better weapons. They got better organized. They started using, you know, radios to communicate with each other, and sophisticated ways to hide their money in the banking system and all that. And so we noticed where police forces started, wearing the flak vests all the time, because when they're getting shot out by the drug people, their lives are at risk. And it's not just like when they pulled someone over and write them a ticket. They're actually going to possibly be engaged in gun battles. And so the police departments start up armoring. They start up getting more sophisticated weaponry. They start going from your classic 38 revolver pistol to now semi-automatics that can hold more than 5 or 6 rounds, and more money, federal money and grants, and the whole SHOT Show, and it's a big business. It became a very large business with the protective gear and this and that and the other thing. It all just kind of changed. And Pastor and I talked about it then, and what we started seeing, what you start seeing, and I'm not saying it's justified or not. I'm just talking about the fact that it happened. If police, like SWAT teams and stuff like that, anticipate and get into gun battles, there is a falling away of the judicial system the way it was set up by our forefathers. There is a falling away of due process, because the police, if someone's shooting at them, they have to make a decision right there. Their life is on the line. Self-defense, superior force, all that comes into play. And so what we started seeing in the news is a rise of police shootings. Whether it was, in a large city, if it's in Los Angeles, or if it's, in some not as well known, like Springfield, Missouri. There's no due process there. There is no due process. You, as a citizen of the United States, are constitutionally guaranteed a right to due process, meaning you have the right, if you're arrested, to go through all the steps that the legal system has set up. They have to figure out if they're going to charge you with a crime. And you can be held in jail while they're doing that, but if they decide not to charge you with anything, they release you. If you are being charged with a crime, now there's the opportunity for your lawyer to go plead your case, and for, there's just, it takes 2 years. That's why the due process is supposed to be speedy. It's not supposed to be like I sit in jail for 10 years and then I finally get my court date. You're supposed to be able to find out in that process what's happening to you, in a timely manner. That is gone. That is gone with the way policing has gone. And Pastor and I also talked about in the good old days, when police was very local. It was a very local thing. Departments had the cops were either driving around the street or walking around the street, interacting with the public, who is their constituency, on a daily basis. That the policeman knew, like, your family situation and could talk to your father, and it didn't have to escalate into some sort of huge violent thing. And on the other side of it, the constituency, in the good old days, you probably had a few problem people, but you didn't have a general bunch of problem people in your populace. And I think with the rise of drug use and just modernization and sort of a separation between people who are doing well and people who are not doing well, and how many people are living under the poverty level and all that, it's made some areas way more dangerous, maybe not even dangerous, way more unstable than other areas. And so police stop walking the streets and they start driving, and then when they show up, it's not a, well, hey, Officer Jenkins, how you doing today? How's your wife? Blah, blah, blah. I saw your son at the baseball game. It's Officer Jenkins looking for people who are now a problem. They're being trained to focus in on, hey, that person walks all the time. They don't have a driver's license. They must have been an alcoholic, blah, blah, blah. And to kind of separate people out and to have predisposed impressions of people. And you all know the rest. Like, it just takes off. So roll that back into these strange days. Roll all that information into these strange days. Shalom, shalom. Hey. Westhold and Colleen and Lampkeeper and yeah, Chasing Life, the masks and Westhold Forge and hey Teresa. Just keep that we needs God's peace that pass understanding. We sure do. I would like to congratulate drugs for winning the war on drugs. Exactly. So if you roll what has happened in the first 5 months of this year together with the societal changes that have happened in the last 25 years, it I'm not going to say it makes sense. I'm not going to say you could prophesy it. What I'm going to say is these riots are a result of all of what has come before. It's not just people deciding, I'm unhappy today, I'm going to go riot. They are scared. They are seeing people dying. They are sick. If you are poor, it's harder to be sick than if you're not poor. It's harder for you to get gloves. It's harder for you to get masks because you have to have some kind of disposable income to get that thing. When we were traveling, a lot of people had masks on and some people had bandanas and things. Almost nobody had gloves. And if you throw that together with you're not doing well and then the heat of summer, because it's proven that as temperatures rise, people get more and more stressed out, and it's more likely that a riot happens when it's hot than when it's cold. You get that. It's a perfect storm. It's a perfect storm of all these things, just like with catastrophe and the things that followed. These riots are a result of a perfect storm of stressors and economic downturn. I mean, how many videos have you seen me, Brother Chris, Pastor Joe do about when people are not working and they didn't save and they were living marginally anyway, and it's an extra stress that they can't bring in that money. And if you're an addict, I'm not even, you guys understand what I'm saying. I'm not even going to go into all that. It's a perfect storm. These days are strange days. And I'm pretty sure things are going to just get worse. Hey, something is real. Is that what that is? Keeping it real. Late to the party. Hey, y'all. Let's talk about that. Let's predict. Let's look at what's happened so far this year. We've got an election coming up, too. And it takes me back, and I should have done a little pre-research, but I didn't, of the riots. I think it was 1968 in the Democratic National Convention. There were riots in Chicago or something. Let's try to make sense. I'm not saying crystal ball magic. I'm trying to say use your logic, your reasoning, your cause and effect. What do you think is going to continue to happen? What might affect what's coming down the road? One, I think Michelle Craig put it very well. Everyone needs the Lord. Everyone needs spiritual assistance to help not make sense of, but to be at peace about what is happening versus getting spun up. I think it's important. And I don't think it's just well, I believe, la la la. I think you should be actively engaged in. Just like I said, Shavuot is coming up on Sunday. And some churches celebrate it as Pentecost. But there's a huge, deeper spiritual meaning to that feast of the Lord, and it's an important one. It's all about the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit is what helps us, speaks to us, calms us, teaches us, helps us to remember who we follow. But back to what the thing I was saying. What do you think is going to happen, Westhold Forge? All the issues relating to the election will cause major problems, I imagine. Happy Prep Day over to Bus. I took this time out to do this live stream, but seriously, as soon as I get off, I have so many things to do because we got back last night, and so there's so much mess. Like Pastor and I, there are some packages waiting for us that we need to go get, and the people who do that for us were saying, hey, we'll bring them down. And when Pastor and I drove back down towards our house and we saw it, we're like, oh my gosh. We weren't super tidy here before we started working on the kitchen. It is like red Appalachian American mess. It is, it's so bad. Anyway, part of my day today is to get some of that Shalom, David Campbell. It could be 1,000 different things. I'm pretty sure none of them are going to be really good. Honestly, I'm not sure some of this rioting isn't planned to cause as much chaos as possible. Lampkeeper, good point. Something I did also want to talk about. And pastors talked about it. I think he talked about it in his last Patreon video. Agent provocateurs. Agent provocateur is a person who is purposefully starting or moving in a direction riots. They use riots as a political tool, as a social tool. They stir people up and get them moving. Yeah, this injustice and everything. And it's been proven in like the G8, G12, G7 summit when there was rioting up in Washington State, that there were agent provocateurs in that crowd driving people to do things like destroy property. As a matter of fact, that might be linked to, I don't know if it is or not. Hey, Pastor.
What?
The Louisville riots that are going on right now, 7 people were shot, right? 7 people were wounded.
Yeah, by the rioters.
By the rioters. There was no police shooting at all at that riot. 7 people were shot at that riot by other rioters. And
no police were shot. No
right?
Police fired.
No police were shot. No police were fired their firearms. Agent provocateurs can do that too. Right? They can shoot up a crowd to get more people shooting, to cause all the craziness, to cause instability. And the guys at the riots up in Seattle, Tacoma, the G8 riots or whatever, what are those guys called? Who wear the black? Not infidels. Oh, what am I trying to think? The anti-fascist types, what's their name? Starts with an I. Can't remember. When did you guys say it? They are definitely being prodded to do some of the stuff they're doing. They're taking people who don't know any better and getting them all stirred up, put them in the black clothes from top to bottom and convince them, yeah, go out there and damage someone's car or throw bottles and rocks at a police car or something. It's not, riots are very hard to control. Once you get it stirred up and people are emotionally, and violence starts happening, it is very hard to control them. I'm back. And so it can wind up causing a lot of damage and a lot of harm that makes no sense. That isn't even justified or right or wrong.
Mob mentality.
It's mob mentality, and they are dangerous, but people use them as a tool. Nation against nation, ethnicity against ethnicity, race wars to cause riots, to cause instability. No matter what happens, I fear not, for Yahweh walks with me and mine. Let Elohim's will be done. We have no choice in the matter. Elohim's will is done, no matter what sort of rioting goes on. And this is a personal opinion of mine, so you absolutely can disagree with me if you want to. I'm not sure the Lord cares about what non-believers are doing. Now, some people would argue with me and say he loves everybody all the same. That's a different discussion for a different time. I personally believe he's more interested in his believers, and that stuff happens. That's the other part of that it's not an argument, but my point of view, because stuff happens in the Bible too. Plenty of stuff happens, and we're not told it because I don't think it's relevant. The Lord didn't care what the Canaanites were doing with other Canaanites. He didn't care what the Romans were doing to other Romans. He didn't send Yeshua into the Romans to stop the Romans from fighting each other. Yeshua was sent for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That's not everybody. Having said that, even believers go through tribulation. Even believers have hard times happen, because in James it talks about the pilgrims going to the Tower of Shiloh, I think it's called, and it falls on them. And James makes the argument, do you think they're any much more of a sinner than you are? No, they're not. You should just be glad that tower didn't fall on you today. So stuff happens, like in a worldly sense. Cars crash and police chase pickup trucks, and Has nothing to do with believers. I'm more concerned that believers can keep their faith no matter what's going on around us, and that we don't lose sight that He is in control. That's just my opinion. Look at Job. Liberty for all, shalom. So far, so good. Safe enough to riot, then safe enough to go vote. Amen. JMC, love it. Okay. We treat bonsai. Yay. The goal is to disrupt standard voting so they can have mail-in voting. Sister graded some great videos on incels and their MGTOW buds. It wasn't the incels though, because the incels didn't. They've done like single shooter situations. They don't cause riots. Oh, it's not infidel. It's not insipid. Oh, come on. They were just in the news. They're anti-fascist. I can't remember the name. One of you guys will remember that name. Keeping faith and keeping your eyes on the prize is quite an exercise when chaos is all around you. Both intentional and election disruption is set up for conflict between the races. Exactly. There should be no conflict between the races. If you, again, my opinion, there's, we're multifaceted beings. I'm an American citizen. I'm also a believer in Yeshua. I'm also a grandma, just all that stuff. If you're an American citizen, I should have at least that in common with you, and we should be able to at least relate on that level. And I've been in a foreign country where Americans were a tiny minority, and I've been in a foreign country where Americans were a tiny minority, and they were not well liked. They were actually disliked. And when I went into our embassy and I saw the first American that I saw at the embassy, I was so happy to see that guy. And I think he was sitting there talking about another person. And I was just like, I've got to hug you because I've been surrounded by all these people who are not, they are foreign to me. I am foreign to them. I don't look like them. I don't act like them. They do not have the same beliefs in God or their society or anything that I do. And so when I saw him, I was like, I've got to hug you. I've got to hug you because you're an American. We have that in common at least. And he happened to be a tall black man. I didn't know him from Cum Sikkim, but it wouldn't have mattered if he was, a Navajo skinwalk. Well, I won't say that. A Navajo elder. It wouldn't have mattered to me if it was some Appalachian American granny with white hair. I would have hugged whatever American I saw first just because I was in a place where there were very few of us. Okay? So I think racial issues are real, but I also think in an ideal world, and in my eyes, they shouldn't matter. And especially for believers. If you're a Torah-keeping believer, you have more in common with another Torah-keeping believer than a sea of any other kind of believer. Now, the next step down is you have more in common with someone who believes Jesus is Messiah than anyone who's like a Buddhist or a pagan or anything else. You have that in common. But you can find commonality with other humans all the way down to the fact that you're just a human. Like if I'm in the middle of deepest, darkest Africa and there's a crocodile at the river and I'm supposed to cross that river and I see someone who lives there and that person's going to go down to the river and try to get water, we have at least in common that we're humans, and that's a problem down there. The crocodile is a problem. If I can't speak their language, I can do, don't go down there. Big gator thing. I mean, we have that at least in common. So I think there are, again, racial issues, and I think people who have experienced those problems in America, you should have a voice, and your issues should get looked at and corrected. Doesn't matter what, doesn't matter. I'm not specifically saying if you're black or white or red or yellow or anything. If you're, a Korean American and you think Korean Americans need some sort of legal help because they're being discriminated against trying to rent apartments, I think you should have a voice. Now, I'm not saying your issue will get resolved, or maybe it'll get resolved on a local level. Maybe it never will go up to the national level. but there's town councils and town meetings and mayors, and there's all sorts of political levels in America, and so you should at least be able to go lodge a complaint somewhere. And I think most people do. But you definitely want to beware people who race bait, people who are trying to push, and cause that dissension. It's political instability is what it is, and that's not good for anybody. The problem is many people don't see themselves as Americans anymore. Many black and lower income people are trained to feel oppressed by people living the American dream. I know they are. And it's not me. I'm not training that person that they should resent or not feel like an American. It's people in their own area. It's the people right around them. It's their own parents and their own grandparents and their own neighbors who are teaching them that. If you are taught to succeed, then you will succeed. It won't matter what color you are. And, look at Asian Americans. They come from, Vietnam and different countries. Right around us, it's the Hmong. They come from Laos. They come from the mountain area of Laos. One, most Americans don't know where Laos is. Two, they certainly don't know who the Hmong people are. But the Hmong came here, and whether they're discriminated against or not, they found their niche, and they are doing the things that they want to do. Like around here, they own chicken farms and real estate. They buy houses, and they live there in groups, family groups, 20 people in a house, and they work. They work hard. They do the whatever working hard thing they want to do. I know of one set of people that grow a huge garden that is by the road, and then you can drive by it and stop and pick produce and get paid that way. I've seen people with ranches, water buffalo ranches, cattle ranches. I've seen them driving tractors. They're agricultural, and they got here, and this area that we're in is enough like Laos that they were like, okay, we can do this thing. We can chicken farm. We know how to do that. We know how to, raise cattle. We can grow vegetables. And they are here doing those things because that's what they taught each other. But if they were taught, no, you're not going to get ahead, and you're going to be treated like crap, and yeah, you don't speak the language, and this is a totally foreign culture for you, but you should just quit and sit around and do nothing and complain. That's what they would be doing.
You think this will be too loud if I mow right there?
I think it's very loud, Pastor.
All right, I'll go out.
Thank you, Pastor. I've seen quite a bit while at work. I've had people say anti-European statements to their children while I'm in the room to the child as if they were a teaching moment. Exactly. And we had that brother Tim come down here from Seattle, and he said he is actively, people chase him on the highway because he drives a pickup, and they don't. Little punks, young punks. He's had a woman with a child run into him in a store with their shopping cart and say, yeah, that's how you treat the man. This stuff gets taught in communities that don't get out and experience more of life. Because if you can escape your upbringing and go see other parts of your state, your cities, your country, you learn that not everything is how it's being presented to you in your small area. And I'll just give an example of a guy, and I get it that it's one witness doesn't mean everything happens to everybody that way, but enough people have done it that it is a truth. There's a guy on YouTube who speaks 7 languages. He married a Chinese lady, and she taught him Chinese, and then I don't know if they divorced or not, but once he learned how to learn Chinese, he started becoming fascinated with languages, and now a lot of his YouTube channel is him going into restaurants and stores of Asians and Russians and whatever, and he's a really tall black guy, and he has conversations with them for a little while in English if they speak English, but then he talks to them in their own language, and it shocks the snot out of the people he talks to because they have a preconceived notion. This tall black guy, he doesn't know how to speak my language. He doesn't care about my culture or whatever. And this guy is a language, what do you call it, a polyglot. He speaks 15, 20 languages now. I think a person needs to be wary of someone else who's just really trying to stir up the racial stuff. I think that it's dangerous. I think it's a very dangerous thing, and people are using it, again, for politics. Okay, so, hello. Marlo, your world and mine expand when you travel. Exactly, Colleen. Penelope the Squirrely. It is absolutely dangerous. Yes, to stir up the racism. Lone Star Living, agree, right. And the first time I noticed that about prejudice was a video, and I can't remember if it was a documentary or a news story or what. It was about a young woman, and I think she might have been Hispanic, but she might have also been African American, and they showed her at home, and the person telling her that she was nothing and she was going to be nothing was her mother. And I thought, that's really weird, because she took that, and it's a psychological thing. She took that and turned it into white people were oppressing her. And I thought, no, she's hearing that she is nothing from her own mother. And the reason people twist it and attribute it to someone else is because that is so painful, they can't face it. So they turn that to someone else. And it's very easy to just pick someone very different from you. To stir anything at any time, but in a time we are dealing with, could be devastating to so many people. American, African American. I know, I don't want to call a set of people just by the color of their skin, because that minimizes them. And so I'll use whatever words they want to be described as, but it would be much easier, much simpler if we could just say American. If you live in America and you're a citizen, you're an American, whether you hate it or not. I may have hit the nail on the head there. Shalom, C103. I'm an American. I just happen to come from Scandinavian ancestors. Understandable. I mean, we all have our ancestors. I'm a mutt. I've got I've got like French and German and this and that. Your culture, from where, the culture you come from is sort of important to your identity. But what's more important is the culture you grew up in and the culture that you're in now. Because, at least in my experience, my family was poor white. My grandparents lived on the railroad tracks in Bayshore, New York. My other grandparents lived in a little teeny town in Indiana, and certainly, a very modest house. My one grandfather was a bellhop at a hotel for part of his life, and then he was a house painter for the rest of that life. And the grandparents who lived in New York, he was an electrical engineer. He was a very smart man. But during the Depression, he had to sell on the weekends to make ends meet. So they were poor. They did not have a lot of money. And the culture I grew up in, my parents, my father and mother worked for the CIA, and so they had brains but no money. They elevated us up to a middle class standing, and then we traveled internationally. We went to the Philippines, was one of the countries I lived in as a child, and so that changes your whole perspective. I mean, when I came back to the United States after having been international for a while, I didn't know how to play softball. The first time I was in a gym class and we were playing softball, I tried to slide into first base and got out, and everyone laughed at me because I had no idea what I was doing. I also got laughed at for mispronouncing the word Houston because I called it Houston. I still remember that. And then when my husband went into the military, uh, it it put us into another part of our culture, which is sort of upper class ish, but we certainly were not rich compared to a vast majority of people whose husbands have a career. Um, so it just, I don't think people should be boxed in by color. I think they should be boxed in by their economic situation. Um, because we have, in all of our travels and all of our experiences with people, we have been mistreated and misunderstood by people of all variety, and been treated the best by people of all different color and variety. It there's just, you can't box people in. Anyway, we can get back to the riots. I grew up hillbilly as heck too. In our particular state, when I used to run around barefoot, and my feet would get black because I didn't wear shoes in the summer, called Mountain Williams. Um, but yeah, I have a friend that traveled a ton as a child. I've always been sort of envious. There are pros and cons within my upbringing. Penelope, to food in America comes from many different nations. Exactly. My goodness. Yeah. We eat internationally all the time. We eat Mexican one night and Italian the next night, and we'll have sushi. That's Japanese, and then we'll have Chinese, and then we'll have Italian. I mean, we are a polyglot. We are a mix, and that's what should make Americans great. And staying with American cultural values. And I'm not saying all the negative ones. I'm saying the positive ones. Honesty, integrity, truthfulness. But yeah, that's the one side of me as a person. The other side as a believer is you should also be walking in God's Torah. And there's a whole lot of, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal. There's a lot of thou shalt nots with him too. And it makes you just someone easier to get along with. Anyway, we're way off the subject. Sorry. Predictions of what is coming in the future. Because West Hope Ford said he doesn't know what's coming, but he thinks it's going to be bad. I have one input to that, if you guys have any other suggestions. Born in 1913, my mother in 1920. I grew up with the Depression folks. It was a good lesson. I grew up rural. Most of my adult life I lived in the burbs or cities, chasing the material dream. As I got older, I returned to living rural. Okay, let's go, guys. What do you think's coming down the pike? What is fall going to bring? What are those elections going to bring? And I guess I'll throw my idea in the hat. The food shortages, I'm not seeing it right now. I've been to a few stores. Most of them seem pretty well stocked. Although I think it's something to keep our eye on, and definitely a possibility that could affect what's coming up. And the weather. If the weather, because we've had rain, oh my gosh, I've already showed you in the other live stream how so much rain and very little sunlight. Now we're going to get a week and a half of sun, so I think our vegetable gardens will be fine. But if it stayed wet and cold and overcast and rainy all summer, I think that would affect food in the fall as well. So I think food is something that could cause more problems. And then this virus. I know everyone's super excited because places are opening up and businesses are opening up and people are able to go to restaurants and movie theaters in areas that are opening up. But I've said it multiple times. Look at that bug. Got an ant climbing across my picture, and then some bug flying around. Viruses, like the flu, are seasonal, and they do this. Sometimes they get worse, sometimes they get better, sometimes they get really bad. And I think if COVID, with all this opening up, I think there's a chance COVID will resurge, which is going to cause, all the problems that come with what would happen if there was a resurgence. We'd probably have to shut back down again. The hospitals and everything would have the same issues going on. So I think that is something to keep your eye on and something that can make the situation get really bad. The elections are going to bring more chaos and division no matter who wins. That's probably true. Mail-in voting, more liberals, food shortages, more gun control, and maybe forced vaccinations. I'm not as convinced the vaccinations will be forced, although if they were forced, I think it would cause a ton of problems. I don't see this administration, I don't see Trump making it a mandatory vaccine. Now, you guys can disagree with me. I don't mind, because we're looking at something that we are trying to predict. We don't know. But right now, like, getting tested is not mandatory. There's a lot of things that could be in place right now to deal with COVID that have not been. Quarantining just makes sense. Making everybody stay home makes sense to stop the spread of it. But mandatory vaccines, that'll be an interesting question, because I'm not anti-vax. I know a lot of people are, and again, that's your right, but I'm not. I think vaccinations make sense for the most people to get the least amount of diseases, and especially children. The death rate for children has gone, down over the years as vaccines have come into play, but vaccines are not foolproof. I will admit that. Vaccines may have side effects that are really bad. So I'm not a make you get vax person either, but I was vaccinated in elementary school. I'm of a generation where we got smallpox at school, and you got TB time tests, and you got polio vaccinations. You got all kinds of things when I was a kid in school, and I have not gotten any. I've not gotten polio. I have not gotten things I was vaccinated for. I haven't gotten yellow fever or typhoid or typhus, because when we went overseas, we got all sorts of, anti-meningitis vaccinations, and I didn't catch any of those diseases. So I'm not anti-vax, but I think if they were mandatory, it would cause a lot of unrest and problems, and backing, lots of people are going to say, no, I'm not going to take that thing. Check the incubator, active hatchings in process. All right, bless you. Oh, good job. Somebody got somebody. Vaccine should be a choice. I agree. Oh, good. Zenit D-Dog. Got him. Sounds like a wild push. Yes, it's an out-of-control push mower back there. Have you looked into terrain theory? There are some reasons for concern regarding the facts around retroviruses. Please check our terrain theory. You need to understand how it all works. Concern around retroviruses. If the terrain theory, and I haven't, and thank you for the suggestion, but I'm gonna extrapolate from that. If the terrain theory is that certain terrains and temperatures cause more retroviruses than others, I could believe that. Because, what was the one I was talking about that was temperature? I think Zika. And the bubonic plague. The bubonic plague was triggered by temperature in the fleas that were biting the rats. I think it was lower than 76 degrees in the area where these rats and fleas were, caused the bacteria to grow in the fleas that caused bubonic plague. Have you looked? Okay. Made it back in time. There's Lampkeeper. Being uncivil or disrespectful will get you banned. 0 tolerance. Good job, Weetree. Not ever going to get another vacation again. Oh my goodness. Blessings to all you. Hey, Christy B. Any thoughts on contact tracing, Sister Kate? D-Neck, what specifically about contact tracing would I be concerned about? As far as a virus and its spreading, contact tracing is pretty important. You need to know who had been in contact with whom when an outbreak happens. It's a medically important tool. There's much conjecture on the vaccine and so many different theories and people with disinformation. It's such a built-up subject before a vaccine is even completed, if there is an effective one. Yeah, there's tons of disinformation. The video that I uploaded this morning, oh, I don't think I've made it public yet because I'm still sitting on that and thinking about it. There is a lot of stuff online that is just not true and it's coming from medical people. As far as I know, everything that I'm basing what I think about a virus on comes from the Spanish flu, because it was worldwide, and it didn't have anything to do with industrialization. It didn't have anything to do with fluorocarbons. In 1918, the medical community did not know what a virus was. Like, microscopic. No one had sat down and looked at it through a microscope and figured out what it was. And so it broke out, and it killed millions and millions of people, including healthy people. Millions. 50 to 100 million people worldwide in 1918. That's a huge outbreak. So to study that is to understand how a virus acts when you have no vaccines, when you have no symptomatic treatments. There was no aspirin in 1918. People just suffered with it, and it killed them, sometimes as quickly as 12 hours after they contracted it. So, to me, if you're talking about you can escape this virus by having a healthy immune system, you do not understand how that virus attacks the body. And Dr. Vuong talked about it in his video that I recommended, very medically, very upfront. It attacks the lungs. And then he talked about who would be very susceptible to that particular kind of illness. But it didn't matter. There are people, some of the young doctors who were trying to fight this virus in their own country, 30 and 34-year-old doctors were killed by it. It doesn't just get people, it just means that if you have you've been a lifelong smoker, you're more at risk. That doesn't mean that a perfectly healthy 30-year-old man can't die from this virus. And the conclusion of the Spanish flu story is that communities that quarantine themselves, nobody got sick. If you opened up your community during the Spanish flu influenza and had parades and all sorts of things, your people got sick and died. It's just black and white. It's very factual. And so you have to look at everything that's being told to you online with a grain of salt, and that is that grain of salt. Your strong immune system, maybe it is a plus on one side, but it's not a guarantee. Hey, overall living, shalom. Wading through garbage to get to real info is hard right now. Northwest Arkansas Prepper. It is, but that's why one needs to study, and one needs to study facts. That's why looking back in history to a prior event gives you facts, not opinion. How did that thing work, and who was affected, and what happened with it is they didn't come up with I don't think they came up with a vaccine. I don't think they did. I think it burned itself out. It killed all those people, and with no hosts left to jump into, it died out. But yeah, you need to educate yourself. Hate to disagree, Sister Kate. I will not take the vaccine, and I will not participate in contact tracing. That's your right, RJ. You do you, boo, as my sweetie likes to tell me. I'm not saying you have to. I'm saying the polio vaccine is why I don't have polio. I didn't get polio. The gamma globulin shot I got as a kid kept me from getting typhoid. That's what I'm saying. That's where my opinion is based. Me personally, what I got vaccinated for, and I mean, when we lived in Southeast Asia, there was a person who suffered dengue fever, which is break bone fever, 2 miles from where we lived. 2 miles. Modern times, not 100 years ago. Modern times. a British citizen child got dengue fever, and we didn't. So I'm just saying, vaccines are how you stop the populace from getting a virus, or they build up immunity. You get it and you survive it, or you're exposed to it but you don't get it, but your body starts to react to it to build up your immunity. So I'm not, it's not a political thing with me, RJ, and it's not I'm, trying to save the whole world. Put out what I put out because I have personal experience with vaccines, viruses, and I've also done studying on them. And I have some medical experience. On top of everything, there was a major solar flare last night, fortunately not towards us. Now, in my opinion, I'm positive they will absolutely use whatever is collected through contact tracing, but they use anything and everything to their advantage and usually a disadvantage to us. It's certainly possible, but I don't think contact trace, yeah, okay. I think there's a 50-50. I think the medical community is going to use contact tracing to keep track of this virus, and that's important. Is that information going to be available to other entities like, say, the NSA or the FBI? Probably. They can ask for it and get it, and would they then use it to make other connections? Like, they figured out that the spread in the United States came from one person living in New York City. Are they going to have an FBI file on that person, who that person is, where they live, who they contacted? They sure are. Could they use it in the future? They sure could. I would agree with that. Hunt down the white papers on each vaccine. You missed my previous comments on contact tracing. Comments are going by so fast. So many folks on the stream. It's such a hot topic. I got the polio vaccine way back when, but those vaccines were a lot different than now. Vaccines are great in the right hands, dangerous in the hands of those who use it to control. How do you know what is fact or not? Vaccines in the past did not have garbage in them. Wheat Tree Bonsai, this is another, I want to say social media blurb. That's not necessarily true. Vaccines in general, the way you know what's fact and fiction is to actually start doing some studying on vaccines, viruses, and read books and things written by people who either do research or have some medical background, like doctors. To me, history. If you don't study history, you're going to repeat the mistakes of the past. So go back in history. There have been other viral outbreaks. Find out what they were like. So let's get back to vaccines. Vaccines in the good old days were not, they had stuff in them. Because here's the deal. To study a virus, you have to have a medium in which it will grow. And so what the medical community has done is used different animal parts as a medium to grow vaccines in, like eggs. Eggs were used as a medium. There is a book called Dr. Mary's Monkey. It's a very strange title, I admit it, but it's done by a journalist who was researching things down in the St. Louis area. Again, I'm not going to say Dr. Mary's Monkey is all fact. I just think it's a very interesting read. You would expect a journalist to at least have done some facts, and you would want to fact check it. But in it, he theorizes, he puts forth the idea that the vaccines that were, and I'm trying to remember, it may have been polio. It's been such a long time since I read that book. The researchers were using monkey kidney to research some vaccine, and I think it was for polio. And they weren't careful, and they mixed the kidneys from Asian and African monkeys in making the vaccine. And when that happens, those kidneys, they're not normally, these monkeys are not normally exposed to each other. And what came about from that is certain kinds of cancers that the media developed: breast cancer, uterine cancer, skin cancer, and one other kind of cancer that 50 years later would be an epidemic. And it kind of made sense that when the polio vaccine is started in the 30s, 50 years after that is the 80s, and there was a whole explosion of skin cancer, breast cancer, uterine cancer in the general populace. And so I don't know that there's a perfect answer for the vaccine situation, because you have to grow in some kind of media. And when scientists nowadays try to use umbilical cord cells from, aborted babies and whatnot, there's a hue and outcry against that, of course, because, many people don't believe in abortion. I'm one, I don't believe in abortion. So even if you get, let's say, a perfect cell media from, say, me, let's just pretend I donate my cells and I let them clone my cells and grow my cells so that you can use my cells to try to develop a vaccine in. My cells have all sorts of little things in them. I'm a fairly healthy 60-year-old, but I had a brain tumor and I've had skin cancer in the past. So if you use my cells and then you inject them in other people, you may be injecting them with the DNA telling that person grow some skin cancer or grow a brain tumor. It's not perfect. Science is not perfect. And if you try to use dirt or other things, you can't get that virus to grow in it. It's a very, very, very specific stuff. And so that's why I said, I'm not anti-vax, but I'm also not for a mandatory vaccine. I think quarantine's your answer. Quarantine is the answer until this thing burns itself out. But I'm starting to get hoarse. I'm going to have to... I still wear the scar from when polio vaccine was administered by puncturing the skin, similar to a tattoo. Exactly. Gina Mikovits has a really interesting book about trying to prove the existence of a retrovirus being spread through vaccines. Judy Mikovits is also discredited. I've seen a couple of videos with her in it, and when you do research on her, she lies in those videos about what happened to her and how it happened to her, what she was charged with, and what she actually was jailed for. She blames it on Fauci, and he had nothing to do with her arrest. She was working for a completely different medical organization. So that's the kind of person. I may have to put my video up. She is not a credible person. You cannot believe everything she says. Zhai Zhengli is the female doctor in Wuhan who was experimenting with bat viruses. And she did a couple of TED Talk equivalents online. And I don't know if she would be trustworthy. And Dr. Vasa, the one who's out there saying everyone just has to get their immune system up, that's not necessarily medically true either. And he's a very learned medical person. But the virus can attack and kill young people too. So to me, that's not something you can count on. I will check into her further. Thank you. Yeah, just do a Wikipedia. There's a Wikipedia page on her talking about, she was actually, see, this is in my video too. She was doing research on chronic fatigue syndrome and trying to prove that mouse DNA was in vaccines or treatments or something for chronic fatigue syndrome and was causing it. And she didn't prove it. She even admitted it, 10 years after she started her research. She could not find enough evidence to say yes. And she had an article in Science Magazine about it. It was printed, and then they retracted the story because she made false statements. So she's not someone you can depend on. A lot of money in the vaccine industry. There absolutely is. And I think that's where you get the, problems. I think because vaccines is not all one process. The way it works in the medical community nowadays in the United States, as I understand it, and you guys can research this for yourself to see if it's true, is like somebody will start a small biotech, whatever, company with the goal to research a vaccine, like Pfizer, and they're not small. I mean, but there are companies who their whole purpose in getting started is to do research on vaccines. Now, the government doesn't give them money. If they want government money, they have to apply for government grants. But they can get private investors, like say Bill Gates, to donate money to that company with an eye to, if we figure this out and we come out with a vaccine, that's when I'm going to make my money back. So they can do their scientific research with the medical doctors who start this company and work at this thing, but they're usually not operating at any profit, and it's really hard for them to get money. And then for them to pay for clinical trials or to get cells from like monkeys or rabbits or whatever to actually inject with the virus and see if it'll grow, all that's really expensive. And you have to have permits and everything else. And then they sell their results to like a drug company, big pharma. They do all the research and upfront stuff. Then they sell their idea to big pharma, and big pharma does the big, we're making millions of doses of, say, an antibiotic, or millions of doses of Viagra or whatever. It's big pharma. So it's right there when the scientists doing the medical stuff, here's what we found, we think it's okay. Then big pharma does the clinical research and, spends that money to make sure it's not harmful to humans. And that's where the CDC and the ADA and everything, the 2 years for trials with stuff before they'll even allow it to hit the market. It's a big, long process. And the breakdown comes from the people who are medical, who are trying, to solve a medical problem, to the pharmacy people doing their part of it. So I think that's where a breakdown can happen. Taurus says quarantine, and that's what I'm doing. Exactly. Taurus says when that sick person is exhibiting symptoms of some sort of skin problem or whatever, you put them outside the camp. That is quarantining, and you let them sit there for a week, and then you have the elder go out there and check them out and see how they're doing, and then wait another week. Quarantining is the answer, 100%. Now, if you're gonna, let's just say, I'm a missionary, and I want to go try to spread the word of the Lord in deepest, darkest Africa, and there's COVID there. That's when I can make the decision, because I'm not quarantining myself anymore. Am I willing to take a vaccine so when I go there, I don't succumb to COVID in that area? And that's a personal decision. Okay, do you believe Fauci is truthful and believable? We Tree Bonsai. I know there's a lot of chatter online that he is totally corrupt. That he made patents on medicines and vaccines and all that, but a lot of that information online came from Mikovits, and she's not credible. And I've said this on some of my other videos. The steps he and Birx are taking and telling the American public to do, quarantine yourself, wear a mask, and wash your hands, are sensible responses to a viral outbreak. And that's as far as I'm willing to take it. I have not done, a lot of back research into what companies he's worked for or not, but as a government worker for 30 years, he's going to have had a lot of experience in at least a government response to a viral outbreak. And I put this out in another video that I have. He was in office when George Bush seconds, read John M. Barry's book on the Great Influenza, which is the one I read, and George Bush, the second George Bush, is the one who started a pandemic response big time in our federal government. Before George read that, there really wasn't a specific pointed government look at what they were going to do if an epidemic broke out. And a result of that going on with him directly affected my husband, who was sent by the military to some of those talks on if there's a big outbreak. So it was like, that's the chain I'm following right there. People will blame non-vaxxers if this doesn't get controlled. People will blame everybody. You will not find many instances of research to cure. Mostly it's to treat. It's also been dangerous to actually find a cure for disease in the past. It's also a very difficult process, and you've got to really be a person of conviction to spend your whole life trying to go through all the steps I just talked about to get to something that you are 100% sure is going to be okay for the public and will do what you want it to do. It's not magic, folks. It takes a lot of time and effort to come up with a vaccine like that for a novel virus, a new virus. They don't know anything about it. They don't know, they've figured out the DNA part of it, but to then come up with a vaccine that's going to stop it from infecting people and causing the damage that it does. It's not a game. It's a serious thing. The lengths that certain individuals have gone to in their lifetime to actually do medicine. Look at Madame Curie. She killed herself experimenting with radioactivity. God, you should read the book. Get John M. Barry's Great Influenza. One of the virus researchers in that book went down to South Africa and was, trying to or not South Africa, South America, was trying to do research in the jungle on mosquito bites and, does this virus get carried by mosquitoes and everything else, and died down there doing the experimentation. I mean, medical science at the end of the 1890s was still just, they barely knew anything about anything. I mean, there were still vapors, and people using the suction cups to try to get germs out of people and so on. And when the Spanish flu hit, the whole medical community got whammied and were scrambling around to try to figure out what it actually was and how they might actually stop it. And like I said, some of the guys researching it died from catching it while they were researching it. So it's not like an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to do, to sit there in those biolabs with all that gear on and all those little vials. You see them taking this sample over here, and if you mess up and you get one little scratch in your bio thing, or if your little air intake thing gets a hole in it, you could die from it. Imagine trying to research Ebola. Come on, people. It's hard. Follow the money and look into the patents filed. Have you done that, WeTreat? Because I'm not worried about it. Can shed virus. How do we know the outbreak doesn't come from a vaccine? Vaccines, in general, the nature of a vaccine is that it is a dead version of that virus. Very few vaccines are partially live. And you run a risk if you get a vaccine that it has a partially live culture of the virus in it. And that's why they do testing on animals first and then people, to see if you can live through the experience of having the partially live virus in you, and why when you get the vaccine you get pretty sick. Your body instantly responds to it, but it's building up those antibodies. And so there's that. Look into the, okay, so Who has the patents on what? Pertussis and the flu she'd live virus. Researchers spend decades working on one particular disease. They obsess. It's their lives. Direct, right. Are you trying to tell me that Fauci has a patent on Zika virus vaccine? Because I don't even know if they have come up with a Zika virus vaccine. And if you research Zika, and the reason I mentioned it in one of my videos is because the side effect that the microcephaly has been seen before. There are people in a video movie made in the 30s who have that same side effect, and I'm pretty sure they figured out Zika has been around for hundreds of years. So it's probably got a very specific set of circumstances for it to have an outbreak. And it had its outbreak, and now you never hear of Zika, except down in Brazil. Fauci and Gates. All right, so why don't you send me a link in an email, Weetree, and I will, if I get time, follow that thread, that thought, because I'm not convinced. I heard Mikovits saying that in a couple of videos, and I don't think she's right. Because she lied about Fauci arresting her and keeping her in prison. He had nothing to do with it. And she never was in prison. She was only in jail about 2 days. There's a patent on the SARS virus. I looked it up. It's crazy. Why have a patent on a virus that exists naturally? So you can do research on it. Lampkeeper. Global Watchman's News is where all my research is placed. Global Watchman News is placed. Does that mean you're watching them and what they're saying? Because it can't be surface. It's got to be deeper. YouTube. All right. Well, I'm not going to look at it right now, but I'll go look at that later. Because see. And now I've been talking for an hour and 22 minutes. I'm going to get offline very soon because I've got to get my prep day stuff done. It was documentaries online that were sent to me about Dr. Vasa, about Dr. Mikovits, about, Fauci being a dirty and this and other things. And when I did my own looking into what was going on there, I found all of them to be wrong. But that's what I'm saying. I will look into it and then make my own opinion. I'm not saying you can't have your opinion about it. You absolutely can. You can be as anti-vax or pro-vax as you want to be. I give my opinion, and I try to tell you how I come about that opinion. But as far as the patents, the virus needs a patent in order to create vaccine and research. Exactly. And if you are a person on the front line, I mean, anyone can file a patent. If you decided you wanted to patent something on the SARS virus, you could have done it when it broke out. But if you're the head of infectious diseases for the U.S., you're going to know stuff up front just by the nature of the office you work in. Just like if you are the head of the FBI, you're going to know a lot of stuff about domestic criminality. And so if you patent a new holster for a gun based on that, I mean, it's just a natural, same thing with people who are in the restaurant industry. If you patented a new ramen noodle thing, it's because you're working with food all the time and that's what you're around. So I don't think filing patents is it's necessarily a criminal act. Now, do I think Bill Gates is shady? I do. Do I think Fauci is shady? He could be, but again, what he and Birx recommended for the general public, for America, what made sense as far as dealing with this virus. Now, does that mean he's a terrible person when it goes on? He could be. I'm just saying it from that point of view. They have not suggested anything hinky. Just like Trump did not tell people to go drink aquarium cleaner, just like Trump said hydrochloroquine might be something that's working. He wasn't saying that as a medical person saying he knew anything about it. He was repeating what he was being told in briefings by other medical people reporting to the COVID, organization they're run by Mike Pence. So just because A happens and B happens doesn't mean C is the logical conclusion. One thing that enters my mind, you may have addressed this, but I'm listening while working. Does someone who is Torah observant take the virus or the vaccine? What things would be a reason not to? I'm not even... I'm not even sure Torah addresses that, quite frankly. Because Torah says, render under Caesar what is Caesar's. No, New Testament says that? Yeah, New Testament says that. Torah is very specific in the outbreaks it addresses. It addresses leprosy, and it addresses like white skin lesions and a few other things. So I don't even know if it's an issue. Now, I think the biggest thing Torah believers have against a vaccine is what is in it. If there's a pork product, if there's any unclean, like rabbit cells or any kind of like beaver scent chemical, stuff like that is why they would say they would not take the vaccine. Pork ingredients would be a reason. Exactly. Vaccines are unclean, though, if they had fetal cells in it, right? Yeah, it's very specific. So I don't know that it would just be, I'm Torah observant, I can't. You have to look into. Would you take it would you take it if the government said you have to? It's a really good question, and it's not something I have made up my mind about yet because I don't think the government's going to. I think they're going to make it available, just like the flu is available. And they may say something like your child is not allowed to go to school without having had the vaccine. And I don't have any school-age kids, so I don't have to make that decision. I think you have to weigh the seriousness and your ability to continue to keep yourself away from it before you decide. And I think if you decide you want to homeschool your children and not expose them to that, that's perfectly reasonable too. I no longer take vaccines. I've had many in the past as the U.S. Marine Corps required it. Exactly. Wait. No on vaccine by the government. No on vaccine by the government. Oh, you're saying you would not take it. Yeah. There are great examples of just how far out hands info disinformation has gotten, and far from truth people will stray knowingly. Exactly. Or just another reason people will believe stuff online, especially if the person puts, has an MD by their name, or is saying, like Dr. Vass's thing catches on with people because it gives them, you can work on your own immune system. It's easy and it's not expensive. So in a time when people are told you need to be afraid of this virus, especially if you are not well situated to deal with it, they are going to be like rats on a sinking ship. And I'm not saying they're like rats. I'm saying it's a situation like that where you're scrabbling. You are going to be feeling the pressure, and you are going to want an outlet. And so, if you, I don't want to get really in depth, but if you look at Dr. Vass's video, it's 45 minutes, and he is ranting in that video. He doesn't stop to take a breath. And to me, that's kind of a key that there's something going on there. Like, even if you're going to talk seriously about something, you do not need to be staring at the camera like this and going, oh my God, you have to get this thing, blah, blah, blah. And it's the same thing with Mikovits. When she was interviewed for one of the documentaries I watched, she didn't blink and she had no emotion. She sat like this and she talked and she didn't really smile or change her expression. And see, I blinked 5 times. She didn't blink. And her pupils were really small. So that to me says there's something more going on there. But people want to believe that because there is pressure applied socially with a pandemic, and so they want an answer, they want an escape, they want a way out, a lifeline, a something that they can think is going to help them, and it helps reduce their stress. And that's why this stuff gets huge online, because there's lots of people who either didn't believe it, didn't care about it, weren't ready for it, purposely were ignorant of flus and viruses and all that stuff. I mean, I've been looking into this stuff for a good 15 years. And it catches them off guard. And so, whew, they want a lifeline, something they can look at. I think it would depend on what it's like unclean things. Exactly. Okay. I'm fine with the vaccine as long as that is all there is. Exactly. Thanks for sharing. No vaccines for me. These are indeed challenging and dangerous times. And that's fine. Hey, revolting woman. But she's a microbiologist. Mikovits is a microbiologist. That does not mean she's a sane woman. Microbiology doctors get under a lot of pressure. And I have known personally at least 2 doctors who were flat out psychopaths. Just sociopathic, psychopathic, did not care who they were mean to, who they took advantage of, and they were doing fine in medical school. There is a certain, again, it's a very fine line between people in the medical community who care about other people and are really trying to solve problems. One of the best doctors I ever had was a man whose own brother had died of skin cancer, and he was really caring. He got into medicine to try to help that. Another person that I knew personally, his mother was insane and emotionally just la 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 la, and he became a doctor, God knows why, and was not nice to people. Would just completely ignore and be rude to people. And so that's what I'm saying. Like when she has a microbiology background, and Dr. Vasa does too. I think he said he was like a biological engineer, something or other. Doesn't mean they're a nice person. Doesn't mean they don't have their own problems. And with her, just read the Wikipedia page on her. There are facts in there about what actually happened to her, and she talks on that video and says a completely different story. It's delusional. So you cannot, I mean, that's why you have to be smart. You have to research your own self. You have to find out stuff your own self to be able to discern truth from fiction. Wasn't Noah's flood brought about from the blending of species and genetic manipulation to corrupt the bloodline of Yeshua? Yes, and also everyone in his day was sinning badly. There was a lot of disobedience to Yah happening in Noah's day. Only his family was not corrupted by everything going on around him. And that's by believers and non-believers alike, because only his family out of that whole grouping survives it. So they are walking in God's commandments, Noah and his family, and not being corrupted by unclean things, but pagan things also, you know, worshiping the wrong God, acting out that way, blood sacrifices and all that other stuff. Like today. Right. I mean, if you want to look at twisted humanity, look at people who cannot even decide what gender they are, what their actual name is. Yeah, there's a lot of really weird stuff that's going on in the world today as far as being a human being. like today, pretty much. Look how accepted abortion is. Exactly. Killing your own offspring. Come on. Consider pressure that doctors, researchers, scientists are under from those funding their research. Especially they've got agendas and those who are trying to get to funding. There's so much pressure. And just the, sleep deprivation they have to go through in their training and what they're exposed to. Like dentists are supposed to be some of the highest suicide rates amongst doctors. And if you think about what they do all day, they're looking in people's mouths all day. But you're also breathing in other people's breath all day long. And that's got to be kind of weird. And there's some really ugly, heinous stuff in the medical community that's just normal infections and diseases and, things like elephantitis and skin rashes and stuff. It's really weird and gross stuff, and that's also stressful. Just like police officers and first responders, I've seen some horrible things as a first responder. That puts a lot of stress on people. And so it's not a guarantee just because you're an MD that you're a caring, loving, kind person. You can also be cold and calculating and cruel. There's just research nurses killing their patients. Research the first serial murderer who was caught in the United States in 1896. The guy who was killing people at the Chicago World Fair was a doctor. Teeth and gums tell her story about the whole body. Exactly, and there's weird colors and smells and everything with rotten teeth and, mouth diseases. Dentists are under a lot of stress. Have you seen later videos of Dr. M? She's a lot more comfortable. It doesn't matter, though. In that video, she flatly stated that Dr. Fauci put her in prison, and he didn't. He had nothing to do with what she went to jail for. So I just, if you're going to have if you want to look at a doctor who seems to have credentials, look at Dr. Vuong. Vuong, and his video on how the virus kills you. Look at Dr. John Campbell, who's a British doctor, who's doing like daily updates and reports and stuff. And I'll just keep coming back to the fact that Fauci and Birx are giving sound medical advice as far as how to deal with this virus. If they were saying, oh yeah, no, you should socially hang out in large groups and you don't need to wear that mask and you don't need to worry about anything and just go about your daily, schedule and everything, I get really concerned. All right. Any truth to the inability to vaccinate against an RNA virus? I don't know exactly if you would be unable to vaccinate against the virus. I would say there are some troubling symptoms that have come out that makes me scratch my head. One of them is people getting the virus more than one time. Now, I'm pretty sure that we were talking to Pastor's dad, who was a government medic for a good 30-some years, and he said that is a possibility, that it's not unheard of to get a virus and get over it and then get it again. So I don't think there's a conspiracy theory behind that. But I would think it would be pretty difficult to get a vaccination against this particular virus because it's new and nobody knows anything about it. And they're having to find out about it doing research right now. and then to have a vaccine developed that isn't going to cause some sort of major side effects, it's a risky endeavor. I would say that it is very risky, and I would not be ready to just jump in line. I would wait a couple of years at least before I said, yeah, I want to try that thing out. Okay. I wish I caught this sooner. It'll be a video after we're done, Revolting Woman. You can check it out. It's in the way it replicates, right? I think more difficult to look at the seasonal flu, no extremely effective vaccine and no cure in all these years. Exactly, because you don't really cure a virus with a medicine. A virus goes from the beginning you catch it to the end when your body fights it off. And that's when you're over it. It's not really cured, it's endured and overcome. And so a virus is also going to be hard because it mutates so often. Viruses mutate. With every person who gets it, it mutates because it's living in your cells. So it's mixing with your cells. And when the next person catches it, it gets in their cells. It's not its own little thing, self-contained. It lives off your cells. You best be doing more videos so we can follow along. This old homestead, you know I will. The girls are done with high school. We are getting the house ready to sell. Can't take Illinois anymore. Yay! Awesome. This old homestead. Excuse me. So are you moving? Woo! That'd be super cool.
I heard that before.
That is not true. You did not hear that her girls graduated high school before. Uh-huh. Don't make me pull out the cattle prod. Woot, woot. Yeah, huzzah! Super excited about that. All right, guys, I've been on here almost 2 hours. I intended this to be a 20-minute live stream. Keep in your word. Keep following Yeshua. Keep following Yahweh. The Holy Spirit. Shavuot's coming up in just like 2 days. The Holy Spirit is very important in promptings and keeping you on track. And quarantine yourself. I'm not kidding about that. Stay home. Stay away from people. Stay away from hot zones. Do not get exposed to this virus. That is the only 100% way not to get sick from it. Meeting a real estate agent this week about selling the land one step closer. Yay! Thank you for your wisdom, Marlo Haredi. You are welcome. The whole reason I do it, YouTube won't even monetize this video. So I'm giving you my best wisdom, and I am doing it for you guys. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to help you all. I'm not even going to get paid for this video. And I'm giving you years of research and experience and testing and all kinds of stuff that I've gone through to come to now the conclusions that I draw in order to help you. And I am giving you my best advice. So thanks for showing up, and I hope you guys are well. I do. I hope you're well and you're well supplied and ready to ride out whatever the next 6 months brings. Because 2020, dang. Oh, Grandma Junior's farm. Good to see you. Bless you. I'm glad you got to be here. All right. Shalom.